Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back into the Culinary Scene Kitchen here at Roth Living. My name is Ben Davis. I am executive chef here at the Sub-Zero Wolf Cove showroom in Denver, and I am joined by my esteemed colleague and good friend, Matt Chatfield, chef at our Kansas City location, where we are today covering all things turkey for Thanksgiving. So we're so glad you could join us for this Q&A session at the end, but we're going to start off with a couple of turkey preparations, get you all ready for the big day, which is obviously still a couple weeks away, so you'll have plenty of time to plan and get everything ready. So a quick couple of notes before we get into it right off the bat. Just know that there are some great links in the description of today's event. The first link is going to take you to recipes, not only for today's turkey preparations, but also for the preparations that were made yesterday in the sides and dessert class. You'll be able to view those, download those. So that's where you're going to find the link to that right in the description. Make that and you can get that downloaded. Second link in there is going to be taking you to the YouTube recording of yesterday's sides and dessert class. So if you missed that one and you want to see Chef Mike, Chef Gil, and Chef Ed in action making those sides and desserts, by all means follow that link and get those tips and treats that they've offered yesterday. And then last but not least, and this is really important for all of you who are Sub-Zero Wolf and Cove owners here in our territory, the link to sign up for the Culinary Scene is the third link that you'll find in the description. We really do advise you to go on that link, sign up, create an account, so when the website goes live, you'll be able to download all these fantastic use and care videos, lots of recipe tips. There'll be both live streamed and recorded events on that site, so I really do encourage you to sign up for the Culinary Scene. I think you're going to find it to be enormously helpful in the use and care and appreciation of these fantastic appliances. So those are there in the description. Chef Matt is going to lead us off tonight with his preparation, and then I'll jump in when he's done. We'll do those two preparations, and then after that, we're going to take your questions. So what I want you to do now is use that chat feature on the YouTube live screen. Type in your questions. We will collate those questions in the back, and then once we get done with the preparations, we're going to get those questions sent to us, and we're going to answer them for you here live in the stream. So get those questions into the chat feature. So Chef Matt, when you're ready to go,
all right,
we're off and running.
Time to have some fun. So, with Thanksgiving dinner and that preparation, it's all about timing and planning out your meal preparation. And something that I do like to do a little bit earlier in the day, when I'm trimming up the turkey, I like to take the wings and the neck that come with that bird. I trim off the two first sections of the wing, also take out that neck, any of the giblets or gizzards, and I will roast off the neck and the bones for a little bit of turkey stock. And that's as simple as roasting those bones, an onion, a carrot or two, stalk of celery. They go in a pot, and you're going to bring that to a boil, turn it down to a simmer, cook it for a few hours. You're going to make a very naturally flavored broth that's delicious. Now, you'll want to season it up with some salt and pepper when it's done. You'll strain all that out. And what I've got now is something that before I even started roasting the turkeys, hey, let's go ahead and make that stock so that the gravy's ready when these turkeys are ready. So I've strained this. Now it's at a boil, and I've got some roux, flour, and butter that's been cooked for about 5 minutes to a paste, okay? And this is gonna give us our very silky, creamy, rich gravy texture. And I'm gonna add, you'll notice the stock is at a boil right now. The liquid needs to be at a boil to thicken, okay? And at that point, we're going to start to stir in just a small amount. You'll get a little bit of reaction when you put that initial addition in. Don't worry, it's not gonna do it in a tall enough pot that it's not gonna overflow, but just a little bit at a time, and then add a little bit more. You're not gonna get as much of a reaction or souffling action off of that initially, but you're gonna get a true thickened stage for what you're looking for. Now, once you have this there, you can turn it off or down to low. It will continue to thicken slightly, but not too much. So you just gauge it by the thickness that you would like, and you won't believe it does take a lot of roux to thicken a gallon of gravy, all right? So talking about probably a half to 3/4 of a pound of butter to a couple of cups of some all-purpose flour. But now see how nice and silky that's looking, starting to change its texture, its appearance. And at this point, after about a minute, we are good to go. We don't need to cook that any further. We will check final seasonings a little bit later, but our turkey gravy is ready. That's out of the way. Now I can focus on the turkey preparation. And I'm going to show you one today that's a little bit different twist than a traditional roasted turkey all in one oven. So we have a Wolf convection steam oven here in the kitchen. And with this specialty oven, we have the ability to steam, we have the ability to use convection, to use multiple modes. Because of that, I do want to get some benefit out of using this to help the turkey in the cooking process, but I also want to leave the convection steam open for those sides later on. My stuffing, my potatoes, my rolls, so many different things that I want to do in the convection steam oven. And so I do want some of the benefit of that. And this trick that I'm using is when we cook poultry, if you braise or steam the poultry skin for anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes, not at a full steam, 210, but around 190 to 200. We did more along the lines of 190, 195. Okay, what that does is that cooks the skin. It's not steaming the turkey completely. There's very little of the meat that has been cooked, but the skin changes in texture. And now when it goes into the oven, it's going to get crispier. It's going to be more tender to bite through. It's not going to be a tough skin. So that, as well as it browns up really nice. So I'm going to walk you through a few of the steps of what we did to prepare this steamed then roasted turkey that I've made. So we're going to start off with brining. Got to talk about brining. We're going to talk a lot about that today.
Absolutely.
So we did some seasoned brines, okay? Whether it's salt and sugar, salt, sugar, and spices. For my brine, I did kosher salt and coarse pepper, fine ground pepper, actually, not a coarse, some garlic, some onion powder, some paprika. You can use smoky if you want, or Hungarian, just a little bit of brown sugar, and mixing all those together, rubbing that all over the turkey the night before, all right? So this is at least a 8-hour, if not 24-hour dry brine. You don't need to have any special bucket or tub for it to go in the oven and in the refrigerator overnight. And you're going to get the same result off of a dry brine. Mine's going to have some pretty bold spices that are just going to add flavor to that bird. All right. Now, I like to put it on a rack so that that bird's elevated while it's brining. So if it starts to purge a little bit of liquid, okay, in that process, then it's not sitting in a pool of salt water. And from there, I pulled out the turkey a few hours ago. That went on the roasting rack that comes with the convection steam oven. And we put it in the convection steam oven on steam at 190 degrees. And we did that for 20 minutes to 25 minutes, okay? I kind of look at how it's cooking, and I'm looking for a specific reaction with the steam. I don't want to see any shrinking of the skin away from the meat. I still want it all intact and still nice and tight around all the proteins, but not starting to break away. So from there, what we've done is we've preheated the M-Series oven. You could do the E-Series oven, the M-Series oven, and we're using the probe system on this. So we set the bird atop the blue roasting pan that comes with the M-Series oven, has that same style rack, and we're using the probe. You're going to see that. So I'm going to open up the oven, and we're going to take a look at the turkey, all right? So we've got some beautiful caramelization, and it actually looks like the turkey has hit temperature that I just cooked off a second turkey. So I want you to note, I'm going to pull this out so you can see it. There's a little sheet of foil over the top of the bird. So Ben, this keeps the bird from getting too black or brown on the crown, because there is a high point on turkeys, okay? Just the way they're shaped. we're using the roast mode where the heat's coming from the top of the oven. And because of that, it's a more direct heat. We get beautiful browning and crisping, but I want to make sure that it's not burning at that crown. So I just do a little folded up sheet of foil, okay? And that protects that crown. The turkey's still roasted beautifully, still got nice and tender, but let's do one more glaze on this. We're going to talk about the glaze in just a minute, but I want to show you, if I'm still roasting this in the oven, I'm going to pull that rack out a little bit, and I'm just going to brush this turkey. In fact, I do a final glaze on this as well, all right, for decoration, for final flavor enhancement. Just all over that bird, just like so. It's that final decoration of that centerpiece to your table on Thanksgiving. Looks so nice. Now, let's set that aside, and we're going to unplug that probe. We're going to pull this out, and I'm just going to set it in front right here so you can see. All right, I'll set it out here. That's good for now. All right, so let's go ahead and close that up, and we'll turn that oven off. Okay, so with timing, I tried to time it out to where the turkey's going to be done, between 3:15 and 3:30. The bird was done about 5 minutes early, maybe 10 minutes early. That's fine. I don't want you to worry about the turkey getting cold before everything else is done. These are large birds. They hold their temperature for quite a long time.
I do.
And we've actually set the probe at 160, 161, because we're going to get at least 5 degrees of carryover on those larger muscle groups. So carryover cooking, that's going to take the proteins to the proper heat level for a set protein doneness we want. Also, the juices are going to relax. Juices are still flowing through that protein.
Absolutely.
If we were to slice into it right now, we would have so many juices all over the tray. We don't want that.
Not where we want
all
them.
of it in the bird. And another thing is, so this is about 162 degrees right now. And I'll tell you, people say, well, I'm so worried about it getting cold. So that's probably got a good 45 minutes to an hour before it lowers to 140. You're not going to lose any heat in the first 20 to 30 minutes, maybe down to 155. Still piping hot, but the difference is all the juices are retained in there. That's huge because that juicy turkey, one of the best keys to it is relaxing the bird. Let it just set. If you're worried about it getting cold, after 20, 25 minutes, take that foil that you had, just kind of drape it over it to trap a little bit of the residual heat, okay? Simple as that. So now, in between glazing that and pulling that out, I did want to show you just the elements of the glaze that we use for my turkey. So in a small saucepan, and I used a whisk to start with to mix those up, but then I switched to a pastry brush to mix those. I've got some brown sugar, light or dark, doesn't matter. I'm using light for this recipe. I've got some soy sauce. I've got some fresh chopped garlic. I've got some apple cider vinegar and some apple cider or apple juice, all right? And then a little bit of fresh thyme. So mixing all these up in the sauce pot, and then I bring it to a boil and do a little bit of a reduction just to where it thickens it a little bit with that brown sugar in there. It gives us this beautiful gloss.
It's almost teriyaki-like.
Yes, just this really nice glossy sauce that you'll notice the first couple of times you brush the bird that it runs off a little bit. So if you see some streaks going down the turkey on one side, that's just where the sauce is dripped down, it didn't cling. We're talking about putting sauce on crispy skin, which doesn't initially adhere right away, but the more layers you build, the more it adheres and starts to caramelize all over, okay? And by protecting the top of that bird from the foil while you're roasting it and glazing it all over about every 20 or 30 minutes, you just end up with this beautifully crusted, caramelized. It will be a snappy, crispy skin, but it's also going to have a lot of flavor from those spices as well as that glaze. So, that's a fun little take on roasting a turkey, steaming that skin first. I will tell you, I saw an extremely famous chef do this a few years back, and very renowned chef, and he wasn't doing it with a convection steam oven. He was doing it over a big pot. But I said, I got to try that. That looks like it's great process. And played around with it at home and decided I wanted to show you all this recipe this year just to show you a little twist. There are so many different ways to roast a turkey, and we just want to provide some fun ones that you might not have thought about. So play around with it, and I will tell you, many of you might only roast one turkey a year at Thanksgiving or maybe the holidays. I will tell you, I often tell people, buy 3, 4, 5 turkeys throughout the year.
They're hard to find the rest of the year.
Go to your butcher, find one out of the freezer section, thaw it out, but practice throughout the year and come up with several different favorite recipes that you have. Our family eats turkey several times a year, and it's delicious when you learn to jazz it up and have some fun and just learn the tricks about what makes that turkey great. So
absolutely.
So what did you do for your turkey this year, Ben?
So this is a little more basic for you. For those of you who maybe you're a novice turkey roaster, you're just getting in, this is your first Thanksgiving, or maybe it's just one that you're preparing for, whether it's your family or whether it's friends, whatever it is. I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks for just doing a very basic, straightforward roasted turkey. It does require a little bit of a dry brine, just like Chef Matt did for his. I haven't spiced mine quite as intensely as he has, but really the important thing about that dry brine is this. If you think about a wet brine, what does a wet brine consist of? Mostly water, right? So if I add a turkey and I immerse it in water and I'm absorbing that water into the turkey, what am I doing? I'm just diluting the turkey flavor, right? By dry brining, by just allowing that brine to sit on that skin and be absorbed into the turkey itself, you're not only enhancing the flavor, but you're not decreasing, right, the turkeyness, if you will, of the turkey. So we did a dry brine on this. My dry brine is very, very basic. It's just kosher salt, and this is important. You want to use kosher salt. You don't want to be using a fine salt, but I mix a little bit of baking powder into that, because that baking powder, as it coats the outside of the turkey, right, it helps enhance the crispiness of the skin. There's just some reaction with that aluminum bicarbonate in that baking powder that's causing that skin to get just a little bit crispier. But here's the other important thing about dry brining, and Chef Matt did the same thing with his as I did with mine, is that when you do place it in the refrigerator, whether it's for a few hours or it's overnight, don't cover it, right? You want to let it be exposed to the circulation of the air in your Sub-Zero. You want that air circulating around. That's going to help let that salt, first it's going to liquefy, but then as it's being exposed to the air in your refrigerator, it's drying out and it's adhering to the turkey. So make sure you don't cover it if you're doing that dry brine.
It's almost like a salt glue that also has another reaction when it's roasting.
Exactly right. So you want to make sure you don't cover it. And this has been dry brine for about 8 hours. I didn't do this. I did it this morning early, so it's had a good time. So you can see it's dried a little bit on the bird. Now we've taken the wing tips off. Gave those to Chef Matt so he could help make the broth to create the gravy. But I want to talk about one more factor that I think is really important that a lot of people just might overlook when they're doing a turkey, and that's the whole trussing of the turkey, of tying it together. Because, one of the hardest things about cooking a turkey is the different natures of the meat on the bird. You've got that dark meat with its strong, almost gelatinous sort of consistency if it's undercooked. And then you obviously have that lean breast meat that you want to make sure you don't overcook, because then it just dries out and you might as well just eat sawdust for Thanksgiving. So we want to make sure we can cook it equally. Well, the best way to do that is to focus on temperaturing the breast, reading the temperature of the breast, because that's the part you really don't want to overcook. But you also want to make sure that that dark meat is cooked all the way through, because there's nothing more unpleasant, right, than sitting down to Thanksgiving. You go to carve the bird, you slice it off, and there's a bunch of, uncooked meat and blood maybe in the joint, and you want to get rid of that. Well, trussing is one of the ways to do that, because when you think about how trussing works, when we tie that bird together, when we pull the joints apart in the leg and the thigh, we're exposing that part of the bird to the heat more directly. So even as our breast is protected by the collapsing around the breast of the rest of the bird, we're exposing this meat so that it can cook through in that same amount of time that it's taken us to cook the breast to the exact temperature we want. So, you know, a lot of you are probably going to be looking at those turkey packages as you go out and buy those turkeys, and they're going to always tell you that you should insert that temperature probe or whatever you're using to gauge the temperature in the thigh, right? But if you cook that thigh a lot of times to those temperatures, you're going to end up with the driest turkey breast you could ever imagine. This is the other thing we want to tell you. You buy one of those turkeys that has that little pop-up thing in it, you know, that little red thing that pops up. The first thing you do is you yank that thing out and you throw it away. That's the first thing you do, because you have the tools in your Wolf ovens to make sure that that internal temperature is exactly where you want it, right? He's exactly right. So let's talk about trussing the bird. So what I've got my bird here, I've got him completely brined, right? He's on this extra cutting board. I've got my kitchen twine here, right? You get this, obviously, any cookware. Heck, you can get it pretty much any supermarket these days, but just get a pretty good heavy twine. And I like to cut a length of it ahead of time. Look, I got a little knot in there. So
and this is a thought we should share with them also. So you can probably see on camera on the turkey, you see how the skin's kind of pulled between the breast and the leg? It's taut right now. And if he doesn't tuck those legs when they're trussed, what'll happen is when that turkey's exposed to some heat, that's the first place that that skin will separate, and then it will crack, and it will start to let the heat of the oven inside the turkey in places you don't want it. So Ben, trussing it protects the skin and the overall condition of how that turkey cooks, right? Just by trussing it, tying that together.
So we've got the neck here. You've got this little joint right here. I'm going to just lift that up, and you can see it right here. We're just going to take our string and we're going to loop it over the neck, and then we're going to pull it equally around. So it's going to cup up, under, over the top of the legs, and I want you to cross it at this point. So it comes here. And then you're going to just bring these legs together and really try to bring those together so they're tight across the front. Now, when you make this knot, instead of just knotting it once or twice, do what they call as a surgeon's knot. Do a couple of loops around the, like you're tying your shoe at the beginning, but just do a couple extra loops, and do it once and then do it again so that you've got a nice tight knot there. So you're pulling that together, but you really want to pull the ends of those turkey legs together across the front of the bird, right? So it's nice and tight. And then you can trim off the excess. Now, if you're not worried so much about the wings, and I don't know, not everybody is, you know, big fans of eating the turkey wings, but you can tuck them in a little bit tighter underneath if you want. You can just slip those in there so it's nice and tight. Again, that's also protecting the breast. All right, now, this bird is going to go exclusively in a Wolf convection oven, whether you have M series, E series, dual fuel. If you have an all gas, you can use that as well, right? It's just a little bit different if you have the all gas in terms of your mode. But what we really want to point out, especially for those of you who have the M series, E series, and those dual fuels, is you got to use the probe, and you got to use it correctly. So here's our temperature probe, and we're going to put this into a cold oven, right? And one of the beautiful things about turkey is, right, we're not overcooking it in the first 20 minutes. So in the amount of time it takes to preheat the oven, don't worry, you're not ruining the turkey by simply putting it into a cold oven. You don't have to introduce it into a hot cavity, because it's going to take at least a couple of hours, depending on the size, to cook. But here's the important part. We're talking about temperaturing the breast, right? We want that breast to be the guide for when the turkey is done. So you have a couple of positions that you can place your probe in the bird. You can see where Chef Matt has placed his at the top, working down away from the breastbone, right? Don't put it next to the bone, because bones conduct heat faster than the surrounding flesh. And therefore, you're going to end up with undercooked turkey, right? If you've got that probe in contact with the bone.
We'll give that false reading. It's not
exactly, and it's going to cook way too fast. You're going to be, wait, that shouldn't take 45 minutes. No, it should not. So either go down to the top and get into this thick, meaty part here along, you know, the wishbone is here, right? So what I like to do is go here to the base of the wing joint, come up, place the probe here, and go into that nice, thick, meaty part in the meat down here at the base, right? That's where we want to cook it, because we're not on the breastbone, we're not on this, but we're in the thick, meatiest part. I find that this works really well, especially with a good trussing. We're not worried that we're going to undercook this part while overcooking this part. So we've got this all aligned. We're going to use, just like Chef Matt, we've got your your tray that comes with your oven, your blue tray, rack inserted, and also there you've got your a little aluminum foil. That's just purely because we hate doing dishes and this makes it easier to clean up. So what we've got here in our E-Series oven, you see we've configured it so we've got our rack in position number 2. And we're going to go ahead and insert position number 2. Remember, everybody, your plug is here in the upper left-hand part of the ceiling, right? So we're just going to plug in our probe right there. Now for this, we're going to use the convection roast mode, right? We all remember how convection roast works. We're using those beautifully powerful convection fans from the back, right? Driving that air, circulating the air, making it much more efficient so the bird will cook faster and more evenly. But we're also adding the broiler element in convection roast, and that's going to give us that little bit of extra browning on the top. And that's why we use convection roast for something where we really care about how it looks, but also how it cooks, right? We want both of those things to come out exactly the same. So here, let's go here. We're going to go to convection roast. Now we're going to go hot to begin with, 450 degrees. Wait, let's get that clear. There we go, and we're going to go ahead and hit start, enter. Now the oven's going to go ahead and preheat. When it preheats, right, when it reaches that temperature and you hear the ding, right, and you're ready to go, that's what I want you to do is once that preheat is attained, set a timer, 20 to 30 minutes. Keep an eye on the browning of the bird because it's going to brown pretty intensely at this point, right? But give it that 20 to 30 minute roast at that high temperature. Then once that's finished, once you've done with that 20 to 30 minutes of high temperature roasting, go ahead and drop the temperature in your oven to 325 degrees. Once you've done that, now you're just cooking to a probe temperature. How do we set that probe temperature? Well, you guys all know this. Touch your probe right up here and now set your temperature for where you want it. And just like Chef Matt was saying, we're setting that temperature in the breast to about 160 degrees, maybe a skosh more, couple of degrees, but really 160 is your goal temperature because with the resting period and that slight carryover cooking, you're looking at a bird that's going to be somewhere between 165 and 170 degrees in the breast. I guarantee you those legs, those thighs, they're going to be 175, 180. That's more than cooked for the breast, for the leg and the thigh. So you're going to have really nice, but you're also going to have a beautifully cooked turkey breast, right? So let's set that temperature here with our probe set. Let's go to 160. Enter. So the great thing about all of the ovens, right? You can track it right there on there because that's what the question we get all the time. Well, how long is it going to take? Well, you know, generally speaking, we're looking at about somewhere between 12, maybe 13 minutes per pound to roast. That's an average temperature. So if you really need to know how long is it going to take, you know the weight of your bird, multiply it. But I always choose the low end of that spectrum. Choose the 12-minute mark. Set that in your mind. You know, now I've got 12-pound bird or a 15-pound bird times 12 minutes. It's going to give you an approximate time. Remember, always remember, you got to rest the bird. You can't just take the bird out of the oven and serve it.
It's so much better to have the bird done early. So much earlier, let it rest. Like we said, it's not going to get cold. Don't worry about it cooling off that much.
Exactly.
And I notice, you know, you're doing yours starting out with the high temperature and then dropping that down. When we did my turkey, not as aggressive, 375, and then we dropped down to 300 degrees. But because I've got some soy sauce, I've got some brown sugars.
Got a lot of caramelization going on there.
I'm getting so much caramelization with just the roast mode without the convection. You have that salt and that reaction from the bicarbonate that is going to do that as well, give you that beautiful skin crust. So, but you see there's a trend of starting hot and then dropping. Right. If you just try and go 300, 325, roasting the whole time, you're not going to achieve the crispness that you want with the skin. You've got to start hot and then drop the temperature.
Exactly. So I'm adding one more step. So at this point, we're bringing our temperature or our oven up to that preheat high temperature. We're going to let it roast for those 20 to 30 minutes. At that point, right, after those 20 to 30 minutes and we've lowered the temperature down to 325, we're going to add what I like to call a butter blanket. And what that is just a nice piece of cheesecloth that you can purchase at any supermarket. And I've just doubled it. So it's just 2 thicknesses thick, just like that. And then in my little saucepan here, I've got a mixture of butter, yes, because hey, it's Thanksgiving. If you're not cooking with butter at Thanksgiving, you're just not living right.
Margarines out the door, real
you gotta
butter,
have a
real
lot of
butter.
butter. But I mix a little bit of duck fat in here. So you can buy duck fat at a lot of supermarkets now. You find it usually around the other fats and
at
the
the freezer section at some of the gourmet groceries, you'll find it in there.
Exactly. So I've just taken that duck fat. The duck fat has a wonderful flavor. And so I've mixed the duck fat with the melted butter. And so what I'm going to do when I reach that temperature, I'm going to dip my butter blanket into the mixture. I'm going to lay it on top of my bird, and I'm going to just let that coat it and cover it and hold that fat. Because remember, turkey's a pretty lean bird, right? So if we're not adding some fat, a lot of times we need to add a little bit of butter to the bird. You've seen people stuff under the skin, all those different things. Mine just goes on the outside so that skin picks up a really nice flavor as it roasts. So that's going to be the last step. And then we're obviously just going to let it roast until that internal temperature is attained. And then we're bringing it out. We're letting her rest on the stove. As Matt said, maybe a little coat of foil on top just in case you want to keep that heat. But just remember, you let it rest. It's 140 degrees when you put that in your mouth. That's fantastic. You don't want really hotter food than that in your mouth. And hey, that's why we have gravy, right? Yeah. Nice hot gravy on top of that turkey. It's perfect. I'd rather have dry, not as hot turkey than dry, really hot turkey, right? I'd much rather have the former than the latter. So that's why we have lots of extra gravy. That's why we made so much today, right? Yeah. Absolutely. So that's just how we are doing our turkeys this year, right? We're going to be covering it. We've got some, we made some fresh stuffings here. We've got there's a recipe for one of our stuffing recipes there in the link description. So now we're ready to take your questions. I know you've been bearing with us here for the last 30 minutes or so as we've been talking about these preparations, but I know that there's got to be some questions out there that you've sent in to us, and we want to get those answered for you. So without further ado, let's go straight into it. So this is a great question, and the question is, do we recommend the gourmet mode for a turkey? So a great question, especially if you own a wall oven, if you have an E or M series, or you have a dual fuel with that gourmet feature. It works rather nicely. If you notice that in most cases, you're looking at a convection roast mode for that. Remember that in that gourmet feature, you can make some alterations. You are not beholden to those internal temperatures that the gourmet feature suggests for you. So if you look at the gourmet feature in your wall oven and it says you should set your probe temperature to 180 degrees, you can modify that, right? You can do that. You don't need to it's not the gospel, right? You can
change the
exactly. You can change that. So the gourmet feature works really nicely, just remembering that you're putting in all the parameters in the feature. In other words, the size is so critical. So know the size of your bird so you can select it under that whole bird section, right? Once you've got that size dialed in, make sure that the brining is selected one way or the other, unbrined or brined, and just get that locked in. And again, it starts from a cold oven, just the way that I've done here today. That gourmet feature starts from a cold oven as well. So yes, I would recommend the gourmet feature. If you're just feeling like you want to let the oven do it for you, great, but I do recommend that you set that internal temperature and place that probe in the breast. Do not put it in the thigh because it's fraught with danger in the thigh.
And to touch on gourmet, so gourmet is suggested methods. So cooking the whole bird, we suggest cooking this to 180. We suggest cooking at this temperature, but you can, as Ben said, you can make modifications. You're not tied in specifically to one doneness, one temperature for roasting. Some of those modes will let you make modifications. Play around with those. Ultimately, see the end result that you get and how you like that.
Is there any benefit to spatchcocking a turkey?
So we've got a great question. Is there any benefit to spatchcocking a turkey? So spatchcocking, if you're not aware, simply means to stand that turkey on its end and cut the back out. Take a sharp knife, cut down both sides of the back, and then I like to make a little slit in the breastbone so that breastbone pops apart. That will allow the turkey to lay flat on your roasting pan. And really the benefit to spatchcocking is going to be that you're going to get a very even doneness I get a little bit of extra browning on the crown of the turkeys that I glaze. That's why I protect them with the foil. Not really necessary with a spatchcock turkey. Also, you're going to notice that all of those meats, because they're at the same level in the oven, they cook very evenly with each other. There's no trussing involved. You've got another step in cutting that backbone out, but it is a very simple way. It's not as much of a showpiece, a presentation when you sit down, but I don't know. It really depends on your family on how important the showpiece turkey in the middle of the table is. We're doing that today, but I can tell you, I've cooked a lot of spatchcock turkeys in the last few years just because they're so easy. I use convection roast on it a lot because it does a beautiful job on that. So it really boils down to how important presentation is.
Yeah, and I do think, remember with your spatchcock turkey, you're going to have, it's a slightly different breakdown in terms of taking it apart. I mean, you can go a little bit beyond just the taking out of the backbone and then splaying it a little bit. You could, if you wanted to, take out some of the internal structure, some of the rib cages. So it's just a little bit easier to serve when it comes to that time. It's a little work up front, but in the end, it makes serving a little easier.
Less work later on the carpet.
Absolutely.
Is there any flavor recommendations if you're cooking just the breast and not the whole turkey?
So good question. A question about whether we have some recommendations for flavoring just a turkey breast. And most turkey breasts are bone in, right? We usually tend to cook our turkey breast with the bone attached, which is really a good thing versus, say, cooking the whole bird. You can be a little more aggressive with marinades with the breast because obviously you're talking about a very lean piece of poultry. And so by adding a marinade or adding a certain amount of flavor that's going to add a certain amount of fat to the bird as you're roasting it, that's going to be a nice addition to it. Remember too that with brining, right, you don't want to over brine just the breast because you could run the risk of sort of drying it a little bit if you over brine it. So make sure that if you are brining the breast, keep those flavors a little bit. I think you can be pretty aggressive, but I definitely think the salt and the sugar component I think is good in that form of a brine, just to give you that little bit of extra moisture that the sugar is going to provide as well. And then you can go as crazy as you want with that flavor profile. Right?
Cajun to Southwest to Asian to French. I mean, it really depends on what direction you want that to go with the flavor profile.
And I think that's one of the advantages of that dry brine. Is when you think about the dry brine and you're adding those dried spices to the outside of your turkey breast or your whole turkey, you're really going to capture the flavor of those spices. By putting spices or whole spice or vegetables or fresh herbs into a liquid brine, you're not really going to get that much impact from the flavor. So by using the dried spices in the blend, when you dry brine that turkey breast, you're going to find that the result is going to be far more substantial than if you did a wet brine. So hope that helps with that dry brining, but just really go crazy with those spices, just whatever you love. I mean, those spices that you love to eat, put them on there.
And so many people think, oh, I'm putting a lot of salt on this. I'm not used to this. Well, when we're talking about a turkey breast that can be 3, 4, 5 pounds in size, when you're buying those exclusively just to roast, number one, you're seasoning a large piece of meat. Number two, you're seasoning the skin. It is going to suck it into the proteins and season it, but it's the skin on top, okay? And on top of that, think about when you slice a turkey breast, you're not laying the knife flat and getting a whole surface piece of skin. You're getting a little sliver on the end, kind of like if we did a prime rib last year. Okay, we do a grand salt, pepper, and garlic crust all over it. Okay, I'd never put that much seasoning on a single steak, but it's the crust. So think about the turkey breast like the crust of another piece of meat. You're going to slice, you're going to get a little sliver of those seasonings on the end. But, turkey breast is very neutral. So it's taking whatever you throw at it.
Can you cook the turkey in the steam oven for the whole duration, or is switching ovens preferable?
Okay, so we've got a question on, can we cook the turkey in the convection steam oven the entire duration, or is it more beneficial to switch ovens? I've cooked the turkey in the convection steam oven the entire way. I have done it 2 ways. I've done just convection, starting at a higher temperature and then dropping it down. I've also done it where I did convection steam and then turned off the moisture the last 30 minutes or so to dry it out a little bit more.
A little more
that
crisping.
steam in the convection steam emitting that moisture, kind of like what we got from this, but
Absolutely.
more prolonged,
Absolutely.
breaks down the skin to where it's more apt to snap and to be an easier chew. But it would boil down to think about where you want to do everything else. And planning your meal out, it's going to do a wonderful job of roasting the turkey. Yes, it will do a great job. Now, we're not getting, quote, top heat when we're using convection steam or convection. I'm not going to broil a whole turkey, so we want to stay away from that with the convection steam oven. But I am going to get very even browning. You can do up to about a 16-pound turkey in the convection steam oven. Now, you're going to go in the lowest position of that steam oven to do that, and I do recommend using the roasting pan so that you elevate. And the reason why Ben and I use these is we want air to get around the turkey so that we get a really even crisping and browning over the whole bird. If we just set a bird on a sheet pan, what happens is that sheet tends to get hot, starts to overcook and kind of make the bottom of it mushy. We just don't get the same product as if we roast on a rack. So use the rack for the convection steam oven as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important when you're thinking about cooking that whole bird in the convection steam oven. By all means, you can use that convection steam mode. That's really going to accelerate things. If you want to slow it a little bit, but you still want the benefit of the moisture that the steam oven can provide, you can go to that convection humid mode where you're not actually actively injecting steam into the oven, but rather retaining the moisture around it. But the most important...
A lot of people say when they roast a chicken in the convection steam oven, oh, I think it comes out more moist if I use convection steam because it doesn't allow the bird to
dry.
To purge any liquids in the cooking process. So play around with that.
And that most important thing, just like in your regular oven, you got to use that temperature probe in your steam oven. So make sure you're using your temperature probe because that's going to take the guesswork out of it.
Yes.
It's got to go into that same part of the breast, regardless of oven.
And this is one we want to cover too. If you got both ovens, if you got a dual fuel or M series, E series, and the Wolf convection steam oven, the steam oven's probe is black. It's a thicker black wire.
Don't make that mistake.
The blue wire is for the blue interior oven. So if you're opening your dual fuel, your M or your E series, the interior is blue, blue wire. Okay, so they will read if you input the wrong one. However, they will not read correctly.
Exactly.
So if some meat stalls at one point, make sure you've got the right probe in there. So.
Do you prefer fresh or frozen turkey? Is there anything that needs to be stayed away from?
So the question is about, do we have a preference between a fresh or a frozen turkey? Well, I think it's pretty easy to answer that question because we're going to answer it in a different way. We're going to say what we prefer is an all-natural, non-enhanced turkey, right? You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention any brand names, but you don't want those turkeys that are already injected with some sort of a salt or a solution. You don't want to use those. You want to use a natural turkey. It doesn't need to be organic. It doesn't need to be kosher. It doesn't need to be any of those things. It can just be a good, natural, untreated bird. That's going to be the most important thing. Obviously, it's going to be critical that you cook that bird from the fresh state. So the closer you can purchase it to the day when you're going to be starting the brining process or actually roasting the turkey, that's going to be what's important. So if that means that you're going to need to buy it the weekend prior to Thanksgiving, and you're a little nervous that it might not be in pristine condition by the day you're going to roast it because of the length of time, then you want to look for a bird at the market that when you press on it, you hear this little bit of it's almost like a crackle, right? You feel that little bit of, because look, there's no such thing as a 100% fresh turkey unless you go out and shoot one by the side of the road and then pluck it and cook it. Every turkey that you get at a market has been frozen at some point. There's no way that we can do it without it. So, but you want those turkeys that the retailer has taken, placed in the refrigerated case and allow them to what we call slack or begin to defrost slowly over time.
Naturally, not under running water.
Not under, exactly. So when you go to the market, feel the bird. You should purchase it with that little bit of, you can feel the ice crystals underneath your finger. It should not be rock hard. but you should be able to feel a little give, a little bit of crackle. That's going to give you the best bird, because that's only going to take a day, maybe 2 at the most, to fully defrost in your refrigerator.
Yes.
So that's how we would recommend it. Natural bird, not enhanced. That's the way you want to go. You don't have to go out and spend a gazillion dollars on some bird that was raised on this side of a hill and only ate acorns that were, you know, that kind of stuff.
Oh, now I'm going to interject. We were talking about freezing, and okay, if you encounter, we've bought a bird, oh, it's more frozen than I thought it was. It's just not as thawed as I thought, and we've got to cook it today. If you have a convection steam oven, I will tell you this trick real quick that we do teach in the ownership class as well, is you can use that roasting rack or the oven rack over the solid pan and steam at 95 degrees or so.
Perfect.
Okay, so for a turkey, for a 12 to 14 pound turkey, about an hour, hour and a half at 95 degrees will not cook the turkey in any way, but that moisture in the air will penetrate the skin, the proteins, and thaw it out the rest of the way while still being safe. That little bit of time, that's so much better than running it underwater. You're wasting hundreds of gallons of water, number one. Number two, you're adding a bunch of water to it. This is a very natural way at 95 degrees steam. We thaw things out with the convection steam oven all the time in a very quick, precise manner, controlled. So
Yeah.
a very kind way to thaw out the turkey the rest of the way if you need
Absolutely.
to. So
Absolutely.
Should I roast my turkey longer if I can? Is there any benefit to that?
So the question is, should we roast the turkey longer? Is there any benefit to that? I would say a larger bird, because the larger a turkey gets, it's going to be a more powerful bird. It's not as young, probably. It's probably a tom. It's just a tougher muscle.
Yep.
So we want to cook a tougher, more, how would you say it? I guess the best word is tougher.
Tougher
muscle.
yeah.
Longer
Yep.
to break that down,
Yep.
kind of like you cook a prime rib for 7 to 8 hours.
Right.
You cook a roast beef, you cook a big bone-in ham. Those are large muscles that we need to elongate the time
Right.
to make them tender.
Right.
I don't think that cooking an 18 to 20 pound turkey in an hour and a half is smart. I would definitely stretch it out. I'd still start with the hot oven, but both of us, we're dropping our temperatures down to 300, 325. That's about as low as you want to go. We don't want to slow roast it at 225.
Yeah.
That's too low.
Poultry is not a great slow roasting item. It's really not really.
No, it's not going to crisp up. It's not going to.
Exactly. So I definitely agree with Matt. I think with you have a larger, older bird that you want to break down a little bit more, drop it to that 300-degree range. Make sure, again, that probe is going to really be your best guide, and make sure that that's inserted into that really thick, meaty part of the breast so you're getting that accurate temperature. That's going to be so critical. Yes, it'll take longer to get there, but again, to Matt's point, that really does help soften that tissue just a little bit more by giving it a longer, slower process.
What is the best way to carve a turkey?
Oh, great question. So we're going to give you a little carving lesson here in a couple of minutes as we finish the question and answer session. But most important thing to remember is don't try to carve it right off the bone here. Break it down piece by piece. We'll show you to take it off the breast, then taking off the legs, the thighs, breaking all of that kind of stuff down, and that would be good. So, okay, you want me to go ahead and carve it now? All right, well, we'll go ahead and do that. So we've got my bird that we've roasted here, and we're just going to use that as our example. Put on a couple of goes. And I don't know if you guys noticed just a minute ago, but my timer, my oven reached its preheated temperature. I set a timer for about 20 minutes, and we're now allowing it to cook for that 20 minutes at the high temperature. And then we'll go ahead and add the proverbial butter blanket to it there as well. So we're going to go ahead, take this off. And you always want to make sure, guys, that you take the bird, place it on a platter, show off your work, right? Go out to the table, show everybody what a beautiful job you did, and then carve it. Don't, I don't think those Norman Rockwell drawings from the days gone by were really indicative of how you should be carving a turkey. You don't want to leave it on the platter and carve it right there in front. You want to take it back where you have a nice, sturdy cutting board so you can take it apart back here in the back. So we're going to go ahead, lift it off. Got a little parsley there, right?
You notice we put it on the greenery. I've got some kale over here. He's got some parsley and celery greens. Present your bird on some fresh greens. It shows it off. That centerpiece, you want it to pop.
So what you've got, I always like to carve with this part facing away from me. You might want to start by just breaking down right into that area just to kind of loosen that skin on the breast from the thighs and the legs, right? Then you're going to come here, go straight down, right? If you want, right, to make carving even easier, you can remove that wishbone preliminarily, but it's not absolutely necessary. And I know that, around Thanksgiving, all the kids want to have the wishbone so they can do that little thing.
Fight for the wishbone.
Right? So now we've made that initial carve down across. We're feeling the knife on the breastbone itself. Come down here at the bottom and make a horizontal cut up to where it meets that initial cut that you went down. And now you can take the breast off and you have a beautiful, easily sliced turkey breast. Got a little bit of knife's pretty sharp, went into the bone, but you have some nice breast. And then always remember when you're slicing this, let's go across the grain. It was just to Matt's point, right? You just want that thin sliver of skin on the outside. You don't want long, kind of shredded pieces. You want to just make sure that your knife is just gliding through nice. And I like to slice it. I don't know about you, chef, but I like to slice my breast, about a quarter of an inch thick. I don't like to go much thinner.
Don't cut 3/4 inch thick steaks of turkey.
Yeah, that's.
It's better to have 2 or 3 slices than one thick slice. And Ben's using a slicing or a carving knife. Grab the sharpest knife in your block, okay, in your knife block. If your slicer is not sharp, but your boning knife is, or your chef knife is, grab that. Right. Okay, but don't try and slice it with the dull knife.
So you can just see here, if you just look, I don't know if you can get a close up, maybe we'll go here, but there's just some really beautiful moisture here. And that's the thing, is that you've got a really beautiful moist piece of turkey. And mostly because, we roasted this bird, it's been rested for a decent amount of time while we've been doing this presentation. So again, that resting is absolutely crucial. I mean, I think more often than not, people can cook a perfect turkey, but because they don't rest it perfectly, they end up with a really lousy Thanksgiving meal. Because
you might have that one family member that says, "I want a piece right away out of the oven." You say, "Oh, look, Grandma's here. Go help her in."
Yeah, exactly.
Get him out of the kitchen.
Right, but you can go ahead
Don't
and
let
then
him
start with the leg, right? Just cutting that off so you have just your leg. And there's always that person who loves turkey legs.
Yeah.
There's always that guy.
Don't even bother cutting the meat off of it. They want that.
They just
turkey
want
leg.
the whole thing. They want to do their best Henry VIII imitation, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, but we've got that. So you can just see breaking it down that way, one side at a time, working the other side, always the breast first, nice sliced. Place it on a warm platter, right? If you've got a Wolf oven, you've got that warm setting, pop your platter in the oven, warm it up for a few minutes, then you're serving the turkey on a nice warm plate. That's going to be a really nice thing that you can do as well for your guests as you're serving them with that. So we're going to go ahead and put this back. So I hope that helps with the carving. Again, take that initial breast off and then start slicing it.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
That's it. All right. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have for today. So again, can't help but reiterate to you one more time. Follow those links if you'd like copies of the recipes that were not only prepared today in our turkey class, but also in yesterday's sides and desserts class. Just follow that link in the description. Again, if you would like to view yesterday's class, there is a link to the YouTube recorded video of yesterday's session, so you can check that out as well. And then last but not least, and I can't tell you not to do this enough. You've got to get on there and sign up for the culinary scene.
It's awesome.
Your Sub-Zero Wolf and Cove ownership experience is going to go up tenfold once you are signed up for this service, and it's free. It's ever growing. It's dynamic. It's unique.
We've been working on this content for a long time. We're really proud of it.
So,
we want
to share it with you. We really want to share this with you. So
we're gonna have a blast.
Use that link to sign up for the culinary scene so that you can just reap all the benefits of the ownership of these marvelous appliances. So until we join you again here in the culinary scene, or perhaps we'll wait until next year and Thanksgiving again, we want to wish everybody the very happiest of Thanksgiving, and we look forward to seeing you here in the culinary scene kitchen very soon. Right. Have a wonderful night.
Guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.